Yeah, but at the end of the day, we need some sort of standards that work across AI. AI governance is obviously going to be really challenging for us going forward, and it will help us to have standards, especially given I don't want to get too deeply into this, but we've been seeing news from the European Union and from the US Supreme Court, all giving very conflicting views of how governance is going to work from a technology perspective. I think in the case of AI, given all of the stuff that's happening right now, for better or for worse, the governance standards are going to have to come from industry in the short term, I think, just because nobody else is really well equipped to figure it out. And certainly, frankly, 90% of the politicians out there have no idea how to even start.
Well, there are three levels to this. And I know you brought up a whole bunch of these articles about different elements of government intervention. Maybe I'm a um, what is it called when you're independent, that is libertarian. Maybe I have this
Sure.
libertarian bent in me that I don't have a lot of faith in government to govern any of this stuff. It just moves too fast. And you had some news that you were talking about the EU and social networks, and it's just like it's always an overreach in my opinion, because they can't possibly get their head around it. But I do think you nailed it. You said the word a couple of times about AI governance, and I think that there's sort of three levels to this, right? There is the AI governance, the governmental standpoint. I'm fairly bearish on it. I'm fairly skeptical. Hard part is, deep down, I also believe that there's a need for it. I just don't really believe, or I don't have a lot of faith in the ability of our world's governments to actually execute on it. So there's that. But then there's the industry body sort of governance. And I think what we just talked about with Anthropic, while not specifically, that is sort of a step in that direction, right? And I think we've covered some news over the last couple of months about various bodies trying to create different standards. And I think there's going to be that level. And I think that's also going to be very critical. But I think the most critical, at least as an enterprise IT leader, if I look at it through that prism, the
Mhm.
most critical is one that we're hearing almost nothing about. And that is the the organizational specific AI governance, right? About establishing not only a set of policies, governance policies, but an actual process for how you're going to govern your use of AI within the organization, within the market as a whole. And there's this article that we raised up on this from CIO, and I mean it was frankly abysmal. And they quoted some CIOs. I'm trying to slam them. I'm sure they're doing good things, but there was just like no meat on these bones as far as addressing it. Their answer was, well, we have existing governance policies, and we'll just roll it into that. And I think there's so many issues with it, because AI is just a fundamentally different beast than your traditional approaches that I do data governance, the way I do traditional corporate governance, that I have to approach it differently. And I think most organizations are just not anywhere near equipped to address that. And I'm like almost shocked that there's almost nothing out there about how to address it and what organizations should do. So I'm encouraged to see the government's at least making a stab, and I'm disheartened that most organizations are not.
Yes, I saw that CIO article. And to be fair, the advice it gave about leveraging existing frameworks, protecting the value chain, figuring out what you're doing in house. We've seen the likes of Accenture give the exact same advice. Gartner give the same type of advice. It's always leverage what you know, take advantage of your assets, start now. You could say that about basically any technology. But I think beyond that, there is this challenge that AI governance from a practical perspective is very broad ranging, both because it's infrastructure intensive and requires a deep understanding of process, because you are actually trying to get work done at the end of the day. And in the middle, there's some interesting challenges around skills and expertise that you need from an AI perspective as well. So gets really complicated, because you have to think about everything from what's happening with my data. And sure, we're talking about our data governance is really important. We're both big advocates of that. But honestly, from AI perspective, that's just the start, because then you have to train your model. You have to understand the math that is behind the model, perhaps not to the not every single detail, but you have to have a conceptual idea of what your model is trying to do from a mathematical perspective if you're really going to put it into production. And then you've got the actual operationalization of it where you have to think about that infrastructure, whether you trust it in the cloud, whether you have to now manage another data center yet again after you thought you had moved everything to the cloud. And then you have to think about things like physical security if you're going to go down that route. So, and there's this entire chain all the way to the power that is supporting that power center, the utilities associated with it. And it's this really long value chain going all the way from data to brains to math to physical security that all have to be taken into account from a true corporate or organizational AI governance perspective.
I think what is, I mean, and you know, you're right. I'm probably being a little hard in this article because it's not like they're wrong. It's just insufficient, right? Absolutely, we use our corporate governance policies and our data governance policies as a starting point. But I think what makes this so hard is it is, to your point, is so far reaching, not only from the value chain, the breadth of the value chain that you're talking about, but this is sort of like the ultimate multi-purpose tool, right? I can use this tool in so many different ways, everything from ideation to developing strategy to, you know, pragmatic, right? As we see these agents develop where it's have autonomous execution of processes and activities. I mean, there's so much that how can you possibly write one set of policies that governs all of that? You just can't. And I think that's where this is going to be the gap, is that people think that you're going to be able to go and approach it in a similar fashion as you have with these other approaches, where we could put boundaries around it. We could make a box and say, okay, this is our box. And I think the combination of the unknowable unknowables here that are so intrinsic to what this is, and the fact that, let's not remember, this is going to be one of the primary drivers of innovation and innovation capabilities within the enterprise, that if you try to hem it in too much, all you're going to stifle your own competitiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, this is a Pandora's box. And I'm not saying that there's an easy answer. In fact, my complaint with the fact that we aren't having any press about it, or the press we're getting is like this article that is like this super, you know, syrupy, simplistic approach, is that it's not addressing the combination of both how intrinsically challenging this is and how intrinsically critical it is that you get it right. And so I think that it's, I would just love to see some people addressing this from a little bit more realistic perspective, instead of trying to rush out to pat themselves in the back, going, "Oh yeah, we've got an AI governance strategy."
Right. It's like everybody has to take the first step and realize we are completely poorly equipped to actually do this going forward. I've seen some comparisons saying AI reminds them of cloud computing, but I would say that as much as cloud computing scales up and scales out, the actual ability to scale those things was restricted to probably 1 to 2% of your entire employee population. They were usually
Right.
power users and developers who were pretty smart about IT. Even if they didn't govern what they did really well, they were usually some of the most technically smart people in your organization. Whereas with AI, what we have right now, it is much more democratized. It reminds me a lot more of the mobile era, when bring your own device started becoming a thing, and literally everybody had this supercomputer in their hands. Except now with generative AI, you can use 1,000 or 1,000,000 times more resources with the push of a button. And that to me is both astonishing and very, very challenging to think about from a governance perspective, because this really does allow anybody in your organization to just type out a few things, build out a basic app, and accidentally wipe out all sorts of things from a policy or security or utilities perspective.
I mean,